The history of the Southeast Corridor is a pretty special one in terms of a catalyst for what everybody's trying to do around the Denver metro area. And I think if you look at the map up there, on the right you see the T-Rex project. We piggybacked off the Southwest Corridor, but on the left, what we're really trying to do is put in place an entire system that is that catalyst for a paradigm shift in how growth is going to occur in Denver. And in my mind, it's infrastructure-driven smart growth. And so it's an exciting prospect that we've been working on for many, many years. I've got a little, what I would call the labyrinth up here to show all the things that occurred just over a condensed 5-year period of time in the Southeast Corridor. We started efforts on transportation improvements and relief of congestion pretty heavily in 1980 when we formed JESPIA. But if you look at this, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but if you remember as you were a kid, we used to play with those labyrinths that had the steel ball. Well, this is what this was all about. You had the steel ball, and on one side you had the private sector, on the other side you had the jurisdictions, on the other side you had RTD and then CDOT, and it was navigating all of those various entities in effect to work through what you see there are the various things that we had to navigate. We had an economic development, Southeast Denver Economic Development Corporation. We had to create SETMO, the Southeast Transportation Management Organization, that's had some transportation demand management. We created JESPIA. We had grants that we were trying to do to make certain things happen. We were involved with Dr. Cog, the TIP program. We created the advocacy group. We did the MISs, the EISs. Throughout the process, all of a sudden there were things involved like ballot issues or issues at the legislature. We had all the work that we had to do back in Washington, D.C. So basically, can go through a lot of details that happened over the years on this. But what I'll do is quickly run through a little bit easier to look at time frame. We created SETMO, which was the Southeast Transportation Management Organization, with a focus. The major investment study was conducted on I-25 and 225. We then created the South Metro Transportation Advisory Committee, which created a much larger group of folks. Evolving out of that was the Southeast Business Partnership in 1998. We created the Corridor Mobility Coalition. We hired a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. In 1998, we achieved congressional authority to continue to proceed forward. We did the environmental impact study. All this was under the umbrella of these groups that we were dealing with. We had, I personally attended, I think, 4 lobbying leadership trips to Washington, D.C. with the collective public-private partnerships. That was very critical when we went back there. Then all of that led up to the need for 2 ballot issues, the Metro Moves and the Trans Bill, that allowed us to increase the RTD tax as well as allow some bonding. We then had to initiate the final environmental impact study, work toward the record of decision in Washington, D.C. There was a tax bill that appeared on the ballot in 2000 that was problematic that we then had to defeat. We were on our way then to get a full funding grant agreement. If the tax initiative had passed in 2000, all this effort of all these years would have been for naught. And then we had 4 or 5 legislative bills that were critical to make this move forward. So that's just a quick rundown of all the things that needed to happen over a short period of time to ultimately get to what is now the T-Rex project. So what were the keys to success in getting this done? And I would tell you that everybody in this room and some of the case studies that Catherine talked about, it takes a large collection of people, public-private partnerships. But I would tell you that as far as I can see, particularly with what's now in place, nationally, I think what happened on the Southeast Corridor is a model nationally. It's a showcase, and it's a very positive poster child of what needed to happen to ultimately end up with T-Rex. So the success really came from a group of civic entrepreneurs that knew what we needed to get done. We then, all the various stakeholders had to put their agendas aside. We all had to be willing to compromise so we could break down jurisdictional boundaries and agendas and turf battles and move forward such that we had a single focus. And through that, we defined a transportation vision that we had something that we could all rally around. Strategic timing was key to try and get all these things done. in a fairly condensed time frame, although it did take quite some time. We had to begin strategizing what the funding sources and where the money was going to come from and how we were going to put all that together. But we worked as a team collectively to secure the funding, and then as always, you need a lot of luck to get these things done. But the issue is that we had all the stakeholders at the table, and I can tell you, having gone back to Washington, D.C. on these lobbying trips, and being able to walk hand in hand with the elected officials was a huge, huge benefit over time. And then what we did is we created this unique whole project that had two unique things to it. It was multimodal, so it was solving the highway congestion as well as putting transit in. And then it was a design-build project, which was the first time it had ever been done. So you combined, and this was all part of these goals and this vision that we put in place. When you combine a design-build with a multimodal solution and all these stakeholders involved, this is how we got various disparate groups to get involved, because we were creating transit, but we were also getting the highway improvements that needed to get done fixed as well. So this put us in a very unique category and gave us a great story back in Washington, D.C. Most of this revolved early on around the Southeast Corridor Mobility Coalition. The mission of the coalition is to develop, nurture, and maintain the community consensus required to plan, fund, and construct the multimodal improvements to the Southeast I-25 corridor described in the 1997 Major Investment Study and subsequently adopted studies that followed on after that. The Mobility Coalition was that entity that allowed us all to kind of gather the stakeholders that were, whether it was the environmental groups, the elected officials, the private sector people, that was the group that rallied everything around it. When we got started, we started out with an education process. We knew we had to educate. We hosted lunches, we sent briefing papers out, we sent out publications, but our key thing was a whole advocacy effort. We sent resolutions to the legislators. We generated resolutions of support for CDOT and funds. We held briefing meetings so everybody knew what we were doing. We generated letters of support. But now I'll get back to the lobbying trips to Washington, D.C. We not only met with the Colorado congressional delegation through our lobbyists, we all knew most of those folks. We had great trips to see all of them, to tell them what we're doing. But we also met with the FTA, the FHWA, and key transportation, appropriate, and authorization committee chairs. Our lobbyists got us into those doors, and we walked in with 8 or 9 or 10 people, mayors, county commissioners, and private sector group. I can tell you it made a huge impact on our ability to keep the ball moving forward. And then we added on top of it this unique design-build multimodal solution. So jurisdictional partnering is key. Break down the barriers and the jurisdictional lines, bringing together the elected officials and the business community to make a stronger project even much stronger. Speaking with one voice to demonstrate the commitment of the partners was huge. Resolving issues behind closed doors and not in the media was key. We had our differences, but we did it all behind closed doors, and you never saw much vitriol or adversarial discussions out in the public, which was huge. A lot of this was based on economic development opportunities, economic growth, which adds to the area. Stations have potential for that new smart growth development. Increased density, which creates new housing options. Businesses wishing to locate within the close proximity to transit. So we knew that all this was going to drive economic development. It could be viewed as urban, so there was some other players that might consider locating there. And again, market-driven smart growth. So in a word, on the left-hand side, in 1981, we were part of the founding group for the Joint Southeast Public Improvement Association, which was a very creative, visionary group that George Wallace started, where we put together a bunch of metro districts to gather money that we could use as a leverage to do improvements. And so it was a unique funding source that we're not sure had been utilized anywhere in the country up until that time. We used our money to leverage and get higher on priorities for federal funds, and through that we improved 5 interchanges along the corridor, added a new one at Dry Creek, put in the Union Bridge, and put in the Yosemite Overpass. So all those things were done by the creative way that we had money, and that's how we kind of got started. That ultimately evolved in SPIMED, which I'll get to. But then we had the SEDC, which was Southeast Denver Douglas County Economic Development Corporation. We were all focused on economic development. Well, a lot of this work over time succeeded, we had development, and we had to evolve into the Southeast Business Partnership, because now what we had to do was include the businesses who were part of the success of what we did as far as the economic development efforts. But we needed now to have a business voice out there to balance out all the things that were being said. Then we had the Southeast Corridor Mobility Coalition. That over time evolved into the Steering Committee, which is now our TMA. So as I say here, transportation improvement needs change, and so do partnerships. So we continue to evolve. If you look on the right-hand side, SpyMed is now the successor to GESPIA. We now have 12 or 13 metro districts involved that have money going in that is available to do a couple things. It helps us fund all the transportation issues out there, whether it's the TDMA or some of the other issues that we're trying to solve on the half-mile issue, but it also uses its funds to help fund the Southeast Business Partnership. So it's a funding source for both SEBP, the TMA, as well as some seed money for infrastructure improvements. Very creative way to put all these districts together to have money to leverage. And now SEBP has been refocused in on the corridor, and what we're trying to do with that is ultimately avoid the need to always have to go out and raise money. Most executive directors spend half their time raising money. We have a funding source for that, which is key. So they're all sort of tied together. They've evolved over time as times have changed. And it was these partnerships that got the T-Rex project in place that you all know, and again, I think is a great template and catalyst for the future transit corridors around the city. The Southeast Business Partnership now brings the business and government leaders together to ensure the economic vitality and sustainability for the corridor. SEBP and its members play a vital role in affecting the creation and passage of legislation. We spent a lot of time down at the legislature. We're instrumental in recruiting businesses to the region, and it provides information about transit options, about T-Rex, and we're trying to evolve into transportation demand management as well as issues related to that last half mile, which is a key element. Those are all the umbrella things we continue to work on. So the transportation partner, the TMA, is a key element. It is a 501c3 that is the entity that can receive grants as part of some of the work that we're doing. Southeast Urban Corridor Steering Committee is a partnership of public and private entities comprised of governmental jurisdictions, SEBP, SpyMed, our funding source, to all work together to continue now to improve and enhance on this $2 billion project that we all work so hard to get put in place. So here's how it works today. We've got SEBP right in the middle. The business community is at the kind of the hub of making sure SEBP works. We've got the consultant contracts, administrative functions, and grant management as part of SEBP, but the grants have to come through the TMA. The local jurisdictions are involved. SpyMed is involved from a funding standpoint. So what we have done is continue to create this wonderful strategic alliance between all of these various stakeholders to say, wait a minute, we didn't just spend this $2 billion and then kind of rest on our laurels. We got to continue to do what it takes to enhance and further all this great work that had been done over the past 30 years. So in concluding, I've got a couple pictures up here, obviously, of the T-Rex line in operation. But on the right-hand side, a couple of quick things. As a private developer, we saw the benefits of all this. On the top screen, it's the property that we have in Greenwood Village. Worked long and hard for many years with Steve Hebert on that. But this will now be a transit-oriented development. So we're going to start to see things evolve from this effort. And as a private developer, we're delighted to be able to participate in some of this. And down below, the Yale Station project is under construction now. It's a low-income housing tax credit senior apartment project that we're building on a site right across from our office building that's going to be one of the first fully completed TOD-type projects. And we're going to start leasing in the next month or so, and they'll start moving in August. So now this is a visible manifestation of what we all tried to create. And kind of a funny story at the end of this, this was on a site that we owned where part of our office building had previously been. Our headquarters for 35 years was there. I chaired the finance committee that raised the funds. I co-chaired it to raise the funds for those two ballot issues in 1999. And not long after that, when the 30% design was done, they came and told me they were going to condemn my office building. So no good deed goes unpunished, but I would tell you at the end of the day, that's what growth is about. We built a gorgeous new office building, and now we're able to do some other things at this site. So I think that shows the whole evolution, but being one of those in the private sector, I just wanted to show a little bit that we're actually working on things, and we have a project in place as a result of what actually happened because of T-Rex, because of Blueprint Denver, because of new form-based zoning, where they actually allowed different types of zonings to occur closer to stations. So